Who taught you that song? The question cut through the dining room so sharply that I stopped humming before I realized I had been making any sound at all. Rain tapped against the 30-foot windows of the DeLuca estate, turning the black October night outside into rippling glass. 6 black SUVs idled beneath the stone portico. I could hear their engines through the storm whenever the wind shifted. I had been working there for 4 days, filling in as a maid because my mother's medical bills had left me 26 years old, nearly broke, and willing to accept a temporary job where the agency had warned me not to ask questions. That evening had taught me why. 12 men occupied the long dining table. Dark clothes, scarred hands, low voices, phones placed face down beside untouched whiskey. 2 bodyguards guarded the double doors. Another stood near the windows, watching the driveway instead of dinner. And at the head of the table sat Luca DeLuca, 35, broad shoulders beneath a charcoal shirt. Black ink covered the backs of his hands and disappeared beneath his sleeves. Another tattoo climbed above his collar. A pale scar split his left eyebrow. He hadn't raised his voice once all evening. He didn't have to. When he lifted 2 fingers, conversation stopped. When he glanced toward a door, someone checked it. People moved around him the way water moved around stone. I had been collecting glasses when I started humming the lullaby my mother used to sing while washing dishes. Then came the crash. Luca's whiskey glass hit the marble floor. Nobody reached for it. Nobody spoke. His cold gray eyes stayed on me. Who taught you that? My fingers tightened around the silver tray. My mother. A chair scraped somewhere behind me. I glanced toward an older man at the far end of the table. He had risen halfway before slowly sitting again. Luca saw it too. His expression didn't change. Somehow, that frightened me more. Her name. My pulse beat hard against my throat. Why? One of the guards shifted closer to the door. Another quietly moved between me and the hallway. I noticed. Luca noticed me noticing. For several seconds, only the rain spoke. Her name, he repeated, quieter this time. I should have answered. Instead, I heard myself say, "Ask me like I'm a person, Mr. DeLuca." Nobody moved. The older man stared at me as though I had just stepped onto thin ice. Luca's tattooed hand rested against the table. His fingers tightened once, then relaxed. "What was your mother's name?" he asked. That small change unsettled me more than anger would have. I swallowed. "Anna Carter." The older man's face lost its color. His hand disappeared beneath the table. Luca's eyes snapped toward him. Phones. 12 phones appeared on the polished wood almost instantly. Too late. A screen near the older man's elbow lit for half a second before one of Luca's men took it. Luca looked at his closest lieutenant. "Marco." Marco read the message. His jaw hardened. He turned the phone toward Luca. I could see only 4 words glowing on the screen. Luca read them once. Then his eyes lifted to me. Outside, SUV doors opened almost together. Footsteps crossed the stone terrace. Luca rose, and every man around that table rose with him. "Lock the gates." Heavy mechanisms engaged somewhere beyond the walls. My breath caught. Luca came around the table and stopped 6 feet from me. "Emily," he said, using my name for the first time, "your mother has been dead for 11 months." I stared at him. "How do you know that?" He didn't answer. Instead, he held out the confiscated phone. The message was still glowing. "She's alive." I read the message twice. The words did not change. She's alive? My mother had been gone 11 months. I had held her hand in a quiet hospice room while late winter snow pressed against the windows. I had signed the paperwork, chosen the urn, packed 26 years of her life into 6 cardboard boxes because grief did not stop the landlord from wanting his apartment back. "That is impossible," I whispered. Luca took the phone from my hand. Behind him, Marco touched 2 fingers to the radio clipped beneath his jacket. Men moved immediately. One crossed the dining room and pulled the curtains. 2 disappeared into the hallway. Another checked the terrace doors. Nobody asked Luca what was happening. They already knew their jobs. I tightened my grip on the tray. "I am leaving." Luca looked at me. "No, that was not a request." I set the tray down before my shaking hands betrayed me. "Whatever this is, it has nothing to do with me. Someone sent your mother's name from a private meeting, and someone answered within 12 seconds. Then ask him." I pointed toward the older man. His chair was empty. I had not seen him leave. Luca's expression hardened. "Marco, East Corridor, boss." Marco was already moving. Vescari left his coat and phone. Luca gave one short nod. 3 men followed Marco. I reached for my purse on the service counter. Lucas stepped into my path. He did not touch me. He did not need to. He was nearly a foot taller, broad enough to block the doorway without trying. Dark tattoos visible beneath his rolled sleeves. Move. His eyes narrowed. There are 6 vehicles outside these gates, Emily. For belong to me. Cold moved down my back. What about the other 2? That is what I intend to find out. A phone vibrated. Luca answered. He said nothing for several seconds. The muscles along his jaw tightened. Keep eyes on them. Nobody approaches her apartment. My breath stopped. My apartment. He ended the call. 2 men have been sitting across from your building for the last 40 minutes. How do you know where I live? You work in my house. That is not an answer. Something almost human moved behind his eyes. No, it is not. I hated that he admitted it so calmly. Call the police. You can. He held out his phone. But until we know why those men are watching your building, you are not walking into it alone. I stared at him, then at the men stationed around the room. You do understand that locking me inside your house does not make you the safe option. Silence. One of the guards looked down. Lucas studied me for a long moment. Then he stepped aside. Open the front doors. The guard obeyed. Cold rain-scented air entered the hallway. You want to leave? I will not stop you. I looked toward the driveway. Headlights glowed beyond the iron gates. Men in dark coats stood beneath the portico. But, I asked, but 4 of my men go with you. That sounds remarkably similar to being followed. Tonight, call it staying alive. Before I could answer, Marco returned carrying a thin leather folder. Boss, we found this in Vescari's car. Luca opened it. His face changed. He removed an old photograph and placed it on the table. My knees nearly gave way. My mother stood in the picture, young and smiling beneath a Sicilian sun. Beside her was a dark-haired woman whose eyes looked unmistakably like Lucas. On the back, faded handwriting read Palermo, 1998. Who is she? I asked. Lucas stared at the woman beside my mother. When he answered, his voice was barely above the rain. My mother. I looked at him. My mother told me she had never been to Italy. Luca turned the photograph over again. His thumb stopped beside a handwritten line neither of us had noticed. Anna knows what happened to Isabella. The sentence on the photograph felt heavier than the storm outside. Anna knows what happened to Isabella. I read it again while rain whispered against the windows and men moved through Luca's house with the quiet precision of people who had practiced emergencies before. What happened to your mother? I asked. Luca took the photograph from me. His tattooed thumb covered the handwriting. Not here. You locked the gates. Because Vescari ran. And now you expect me to follow you somewhere else. His gray eyes held mine. No. I expect you to decide whether you want answers. That stopped me. 10 minutes later, I followed him upstairs. Marco walked 6 feet ahead. 2 men remained behind us. Another waited at the landing, speaking softly into a radio. Luca did not look back to see whether I was coming. Somehow, I appreciated that. At the end of the 3rd-floor corridor, he stopped before a dark wooden door. Marco handed him an old brass key. Nobody enters, Lucas said. Understood, boss. The lock clicked. The room beyond smelled like cedar, dust, and something faintly floral. Moonlight spilled across covered furniture. Luca entered slowly. His shoulders changed. Not softer. Heavier. I saw an old vanity, a row of books, a silver-backed hairbrush, photographs turned face down on a dresser. This was not a room preserved for display. It was a room nobody had been brave enough to disturb. Isabella's? I asked. Luca nodded. She died when I was 14. How? His jaw tightened. A car accident. I waited. He looked toward the window. That is the story I was given. There was no self-pity in his voice. That made it worse. I moved toward a shelf where a small wooden music box sat beneath a layer of dust. Do not touch that. I stopped. Luca's tone had changed. Cold again. Commanding. I turned. Then asked me properly. His eyes narrowed. Downstairs, a door slammed. Footsteps crossed the hall. Neither of us moved. Finally, Luca exhaled. Please. I lifted the music box. His expression did something I could not name. I wound the tiny brass key. The melody began. My breath caught. It was my mother's lullaby. Note for note. Luca. He stared at the box. She used to play it when I could not sleep. The melody reached the place where my mother always stopped humming. Then it continued. A second verse. For soft measures I had never heard sung aloud. Yet I knew them. Wait. I closed my eyes. Flour on my mother's hands. Sunday mornings. Her old red cookbook opened beside the stove. Words written in blue ink along the margins of a recipe for almond cookies. I had thought they were Italian instructions. My mother wrote those notes down. Luca stepped closer. Where? In her cookbook. Where is it now? A storage unit in Evanston. I could not fit everything into my apartment after she died. His gaze sharpened. He reached for his phone. I caught his wrist before I thought better of it. The tattoos beneath my fingers made the gesture feel even more reckless. 3 men appeared in the doorway almost instantly. Luca raised one hand. They stopped. You are not sending your people through my mother's belongings. His eyes dropped to my hand on his wrist. I released him. Then we go together, he said. Tomorrow. Tonight. It is after midnight. Vescari heard your mother's name and disappeared. 2 strangers are watching your apartment. Tomorrow is a luxury I do not trust. I hated that he was right. Luca looked at the music box, then at the photograph still in his hand. Your mother did not leave you a lullaby, Emily. The room went silent around us. She left you a key. By 12:47, I was sitting in the back of a black Escalade wondering how a song my mother hummed over burnt toast had put me inside a 3-vehicle convoy. Rain streaked the windows. Marco drove. Lucas sat beside me, silent, one tattooed hand resting on his knee while his phone vibrated every few minutes. A second SUV stayed 20 yards ahead. Another followed behind. When we reached the storage facility in Evanston, the front vehicle stopped first. 4 men stepped out beneath the security lights. One checked the office. Another walked the fence line. Marco did not unlock our doors until Luca gave a small nod. I looked at him. Do you ever go anywhere without turning it into a military operation? Not twice. I could not tell whether he was joking. Inside, fluorescent lights buzzed above long concrete hallways. My sneakers sounded strangely loud beside Luca's heavy boots. 2 of his men remained at the entrance. Marco walked ahead. I carried the key to Unit 217. They stay outside, I said. Luca glanced at Marco. Outside. No argument. No explanation. They stopped. I unlocked the metal door myself. The smell hit me first. Cardboard. Dust. My mother's lavender detergent trapped inside old blankets. For 1 second, the Mafia world disappeared. I saw Christmas ornaments. Her chipped yellow lamp. A box labeled Emily School. My throat tightened. Lucas stayed near the doorway. He did not touch anything. Red cookbook, he said quietly. I remember. I found it beneath a stack of kitchen towels. The cover was faded, corners softened by years of flour and fingerprints. I opened to the almond cookies. Blue handwriting filled the margin. Italian words. Numbers. Initials. Luca moved closer. His eyes followed the lines. These numbers are dates. How do you know? Because I remember one of them. His finger stopped beside October 9th, 2012. His face hardened. The night my father's warehouse disappeared from our control. I looked at the initials beside it. VR. Before I could ask, the lights went out. Darkness swallowed the unit. Footsteps sounded somewhere down the corridor. Fast. Marco's voice came through the dark. Boss. Luca moved immediately. Behind me. His arm came across my path without touching me. A flashlight snapped on near the entrance. Another beam swept the hallway. Lock the exterior doors, Lucas said. Nobody leaves. Shoes struck concrete. A metal door rattled somewhere beyond us. Then silence. I realized I was gripping the back of Lucas' shirt. I let go. Sorry. Do not be. His voice was lower now. Close. The emergency lights flickered red. Marco appeared several seconds later carrying a small wooden box. Someone was already inside the next unit. They left this behind. Luca opened it. A cassette tape lay inside beside a silver medal. I recognized the medal instantly. My mother had worn it in every photograph from before I was born. That belonged to her. Luca reached for the cassette, then stopped. You open it. That surprised me. I lifted the tape. Written across the label in my mother's handwriting were 3 words. For Emily only. My hand started shaking. Luca noticed. He said nothing. A thin cut crossed his knuckle, probably from the storage door in the dark. I pulled a tissue from my purse and held it out. He looked at it, then at me. You are hurt. It is nothing. That was not the question. Something shifted in his eyes. He accepted the tissue. Our fingers almost touched. Almost. Then he stepped back. Marco returned with an old cassette player from the facility office. I inserted the tape. Static filled the unit. A breath. Then my mother's voice came through the tiny speaker, alive enough to make my knees weaken. Emily, if you are hearing this, Isabella DeLuca was right. Secrets do not stay buried. And the man who betrayed her is probably standing closer to her son than he knows. My mother's voice filled the storage unit, thin beneath the static, but unmistakably hers. I forgot the men outside. I forgot the red emergency lights. For a few seconds, I was 25 again, standing in her kitchen while she complained that I never put enough cinnamon in anything. Isabella was my friend, she said. She found records she was never supposed to see. Payments. Missing money. Names of men who smiled at her dinner table and betrayed her husband after midnight. Luca did not move. The tissue I had given him remained wrapped around one knuckle. Behind him, Marco stood near the half-open door, listening without appearing to listen. Isabella wanted to expose them. I begged her to wait. She had a son. She told me that was exactly why she could not. Luca lowered his eyes. His jaw tightened. 3 days later, she was dead. Static swallowed the next few words. My chest tightened. I kept copies of what we found. I hid them because someone inside the DeLuca family was still protecting the traitor. If Emily ever hears this, tell her I am sorry. I wanted my daughter to grow up believing ordinary problems were the worst things waiting outside her door. The tape clicked off. Nobody spoke. Lucas stared at the cassette player. Play it again. No, his eyes lifted to mine. Marco shifted slightly. Luca looked at him once. Marco immediately stepped into the hallway and pulled the door almost closed behind him. I folded my arms. You heard enough. Your mother knew who betrayed mine. My mother spent the rest of her life afraid. And mine spent the rest of hers in a cemetery. The words landed hard. Luca turned away before I could answer. His hand closed around the edge of a metal shelf. The steel gave a faint groan beneath his grip. Then his fingers opened. Slowly. If you find this person, I asked, what are you going to do? Silence. The fluorescent lights flickered back on. Luca's tattoos looked darker beneath the cold white glare. That is not your concern. It became my concern when men started watching my apartment. I will handle them. That is what men like you always say. His eyes sharpened. Men like me. Men who think being strong means nobody else gets a choice. The hallway went quiet. Even through the door, I could feel his men waiting. Luca stepped closer, then stopped several feet away. Restraint. Deliberate. You think you know me because you heard one tape? No. I think I know what revenge looks like when someone refuses to call it revenge. His breathing changed. Barely. Be careful, Emily. My heart kicked against my ribs, but I held his gaze. That sounded like a threat. It was advice. Then take some yourself. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then Luca looked toward the cassette. Something in his face had changed. Not softened. Cracked. My mother sang that song every night until I was 14, he said. After she died, nobody in that house ever sang again. His voice was so quiet, I almost wished he had shouted. I looked at the man everyone outside that door called boss and saw, for 1 second, the boy left behind inside him. Then do not let the person who took her decide what you become. Luca looked at me. No answer. Marco opened the door. Boss, we found something behind the false panel in the next unit. He carried in a narrow ledger wrapped in cloth. Luca opened it. Dates. Payments. Initials. His eyes moved down the page and stopped. I saw the change before he spoke. What is it? He turned the ledger toward me. Beside my mother's name was another entry. Emily Carter. Beneath it, in faded ink, were 5 words that made the room tilt beneath my feet. Bloodline confirmed. Keep her hidden. The words blurred on the page. Bloodline confirmed. Keep her hidden. I heard the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Somewhere beyond the storage unit, one of Luca's men spoke quietly into a radio. I looked at Luca. He was already looking at me. What does that mean? My voice sounded smaller than I wanted. I do not know. You read these records faster than I do. That does not mean I know who wrote that. I took the ledger from him. My mother's name appeared beside a date 26 years earlier. Beneath it was another name, partly faded. DeLuca. My stomach turned cold. My father was Michael Carter. Luca said nothing. That silence hurt more than an answer. You know something? Emily. Do not. I stepped back. Do not use my name like that while deciding what truth I can handle. Marco appeared at the doorway. His eyes moved from me to Luca. Boss, the convoy is ready. Luca did not look away from me. Give us the room. Marco hesitated for half a second. Then he nodded. The hallway emptied. That was Luca's world. One sentence, and armed men disappeared behind concrete walls. Mine was a storage unit filled with my mother's Christmas decorations and a bank account that barely survived rent. I had never felt the distance between us more clearly. There was a man named Anthony DeLuca. Luca finally said. My father's younger cousin. He disappeared around the time your mother left Chicago. And you think he was my father? I think someone wanted your connection to this family hidden. That was not my question. His jaw tightened. Yes, it is possible. The room seemed to tilt. I sat on a cardboard box because my knees no longer trusted me. Michael Carter had taught me to ride a bicycle. He had packed peanut butter sandwiches for school and cut them diagonally because I insisted they tasted better that way. He had died when I was 12. He was my father, I whispered. Luca crouched several feet away, leaving space between us. Nothing written in that book can take that from you. I looked at him. The cold mafia boss who could lock gates with 2 words was suddenly careful with every breath. How long have you suspected? Since I saw your mother's photograph. My chest tightened. You knew? I suspected. And you said nothing. I wanted proof before I put another ghost into your life. You do not get to choose which ghosts belong to me. Silence. His eyes lowered. You are right. That stopped me almost as effectively as an argument would have. A phone vibrated in his pocket. He ignored it. Then another vibration. Marco called through the door. Boss, we need to move. Lucas stood. Emily, come back to the estate until we verify this. No, his face became still. Someone is looking for you. And every answer I find around you comes with another thing you decided not to tell me. I can protect you. That is not the same as trusting me. His hand tightened at his side. Outside, engine started. Men waited. The entire machine of his world was ready for one command. I am going home, I said. Marco appeared behind him, watching Luca for the order I knew he expected. Stop her. Bring her back. Lock the doors. Luca stared at me for a long time. Then something in his face surrendered. Marco. Boss. Bring her car. Marco blinked once. Her car. You heard me. Luca stepped away from the doorway, leaving it completely open. 2 men follow at a distance. She does not see them unless she needs them. I shook my head. Luca, that part is not negotiable tonight. You almost made progress. A tired shadow of a smile touched his mouth and vanished. I am learning. I walked past him. He did not reach for me. He did not order me back. At the end of the corridor, Marco's phone rang. He answered, listened, then turned sharply toward Luca. Boss, we identified the name behind the bloodline entry. I stopped. Luca's face hardened. Who? Marco looked at me before answering. Vincent Rizzo. The name meant nothing to me. It clearly meant everything to Luca. His tattooed hand slowly closed into a fist. That is impossible, he said. Marco's voice dropped. He has been your family advisor for 23 years. Vincent Rizzo had been standing 10 feet from me the first night I entered Luca's house. I remembered him now. Silver hair, dark overcoat. The older man who had watched me hum my mother's song and then disappeared before the gates locked. By the time I reached my apartment, dawn had turned the Chicago sky the color of dirty glass. Luca's men kept their distance exactly as promised. I saw their black SUV once in my rearview mirror, then never again. My apartment felt painfully ordinary after the DeLuca estate. A dripping kitchen faucet. Unpaid medical bills beneath a magnet on the refrigerator. My mother's chipped blue coffee mug beside the sink. I wanted ordinary. I needed it. But the ledger had followed me home inside my head. Bloodline confirmed. Keep her hidden. I opened the photograph Luca had let me keep. Palermo, 1998. My mother stood beside Isabella. Vincent stood behind them. Younger, but unmistakable. His left hand rested on Isabella's chair. Something caught my eye. A ring. Heavy silver. Black stone. I had seen the same ring in another photograph. I pulled down one of my mother's boxes and searched until sunrise. Tax records. Birthday cards. Receipts. Then I found it. A photograph from my parents' wedding. Michael Carter stood beside my mother, smiling. Behind them was a man I did not recognize. On his hand was Vincent's ring. Written on the back in my mother's handwriting were 4 words. Daniel Rossi, our witness. Not Anthony DeLuca. Daniel Rossi. My pulse quickened. I searched the old papers again. A newspaper clipping slipped from an envelope. Daniel Rossi. Assistant United States Attorney. Killed in a highway accident 27 years ago. The date was 7 months before I was born. I stared at his face. My eyes. My chin. My mother had not hidden DeLuca blood. She had hidden a prosecutor. My phone rang. Luca. I answered. Emily, where are you? My apartment. Stay there. His voice was colder than I had ever heard it. Behind him, I heard car doors closing and men speaking over radios. Vincent is gone. Luca, listen to me. The ledger is false. Silence. What? My mother knew a federal prosecutor named Daniel Rossi. I think he was my biological father. Another silence. Shorter. Sharper. How do you know? Because I have his photograph, and Vincent is in my parents' wedding picture. I heard Luca give an order away from the phone. Marco, turn the convoy around. Where are you going? I asked. To you. No. Where were you going before I called? He did not answer. That was answer enough. You found Vincent. Emily, do not become the man he expects you to be. His breathing went quiet. Stay inside. The call ended. I grabbed my mother's box again, angry enough to ignore him. Beneath the wedding photograph was a small envelope taped to the cardboard. My name was written across it. Inside was another cassette. I pushed it into the old player I had brought home from storage. Static. Then my mother's voice. Emily, if Vincent ever tells you that you belong to the DeLuca bloodline, he is lying. Daniel Rossi was your biological father. Michael knew. He chose to raise you anyway. I covered my mouth. Her voice continued. Vincent killed the truth because Isabella and Daniel were going to expose him. I kept the final evidence somewhere he would never look. Inside the church where Isabella married Luca's father. My phone vibrated. Marco's name appeared. Emily, he said when I answered. Luca shut off his phone. An engine roared somewhere behind him. Where is he? St. Michael's. I looked at the cassette player. My mother's voice was still speaking. If Luca finds Vincent before he hears this, stop him. Not for Vincent. For Luca. I grabbed my coat. Outside my window, the black SUV that had been protecting me was already pulling toward the curb. For the first time, I was not running away from Luca's world. I was running toward it before it swallowed what was left of him. St. Michael's appeared through the rain like something the city had forgotten. The stone church had been closed for years, its bell tower dark above a narrow street lined with bare trees. 3 black SUVs blocked the curb. Another sat across the intersection with its headlights on. Men in dark coats stood beneath the broken awning, watching every direction. The moment our vehicle stopped, one of them opened my door. Where is Luca? I asked. Nobody answered. Marco came around the hood. Inside. And Vincent. His silence told me enough. I started toward the church. Marco caught up without touching me. Emily, boss said you stay outside. I looked at him. Then it is fortunate I do not work for him anymore. Something almost like approval crossed Marco's face. He opened the door. Cold air followed me inside. My shoes struck old stone. One man stood beside each exit. 2 more watched the aisle. At the far end, beneath a faded stained glass window, Luca faced Vincent. Luca had removed his coat. Black ink covered his forearms. His shoulders were rigid beneath his dark shirt. Vincent looked smaller than I remembered. Older. You spent 23 years at my table, Luca said. His voice barely carried, yet nobody moved. You watched me bury my father. You watched me blame the wrong men for my mother. Vincent lifted his chin. I protected this family. You protected yourself. I saw Luca's hand close. Marco stopped beside me. Luca. He turned. The fury in his face frightened me. Not because I thought he would hurt me. Because I could see how close he was to becoming someone he would never forgive. You should not be here. My mother left another tape. Vincent's expression changed. Luca saw it. What did she say? Daniel Rossi was my biological father. The bloodline entry was fake. Luca went still. And Vincent knew. I stepped closer. Daniel and Isabella were collecting evidence against him. My mother hid the final proof here. Vincent laughed once, without humor. You believe a frightened woman's recording? I believe dates. I pulled the wedding photograph from my coat. I believe the ring on your hand. I believe the ledger entry that named a DeLuca who disappeared before my mother even met him. And I believe you panicked when you heard her song. Silence spread through the church. Luca looked at Vincent. The men near the doors shifted. One glance from Luca stopped them. Where is the evidence? He asked me. I remembered my mother's words. Somewhere he would never look. Isabella married Luca's father here. I looked toward the old altar, then the small wooden kneeler beside it. A carved music note marked one corner. My breath caught. Inside a narrow compartment beneath it, Marco found an envelope sealed in yellowed plastic. records, photographs, a statement signed by Daniel Rossi and Isabella De Luca. Luca read the first page. His face emptied. Vincent took one step backward. Two men quietly closed the doors. Luca moved toward him. Luca. He stopped. Do not ask me to forgive him. I am not. Rain rattled against the stained glass. Then what? I looked at the photograph of Isabella in his hand. If you become what he expects tonight, he takes your mother from you twice. Luca stared at me. His breathing slowed. His tattooed hand opened. Closed. Opened again. Nobody in that church dared speak. Finally, he looked at Marco. Call the authorities. Marco blinked. Boss. Turn over everything. The records. The tapes. All of it. Vincent's confidence disappeared. Luca stepped away from him. That single step felt larger than the entire church. Outside, distant sirens began to rise through the rain. Luca came toward me, but stopped before reaching me. You came back. Do not misunderstand. I came to stop you from making a mistake. A tired shadow touched his eyes. That sounds like you. You are welcome. For the first time that night, his mouth almost smiled. Then I noticed what he was holding beneath the evidence packet. A final photograph. Isabella. My mother. Daniel Rossi. And on the back, one line in Isabella's handwriting. If our children ever meet, tell them we tried to leave them a better world. Luca read it again. Then he looked at me. Maybe they did. 3 months later, I learned that freedom could sound like a quiet apartment. No radios outside my door. No black SUV across the street. No bodyguard pretending to read a newspaper while watching the entrance. Luca had kept his word. Vincent's records had gone to federal investigators, along with my mother's tapes and Daniel Rossi's statement. I returned to ordinary life. I found work at a small neighborhood literacy center, finished paying the last of my mother's medical bills, and finally unpacked the boxes I had been afraid to open. Luca never called. That surprised me. Then it hurt. Then I understood. For the first time since we met, he was protecting me by leaving me alone. On a cold January afternoon, I was helping close the center when conversation near the front desk suddenly faded. I heard an engine idling outside. Then another. I looked through the window. 2 black Escalades waited at the curb. Marco stepped out first. Dark coat. Watchful eyes. He checked the sidewalk, then opened the rear door. Luca emerged. Black boots. Charcoal shirt beneath a heavy coat. The scar through his eyebrow caught the winter light. Tattoos showed across his hands. People moved aside before he reached the entrance. He was still dangerous. Still surrounded by men who watched doors instead of decorations. Still unmistakably the center of a world I would never belong to. He walked inside alone. Marco remained outside. You are frightening the volunteers, I said. Luca glanced toward the front desk. 3 women immediately became fascinated by paperwork. I stayed across the street. Your vehicles are the size of small apartments. His mouth almost smiled. I can move them. That would be considerate. He looked at me for several seconds. Can I sit? Such a simple question. From him, it meant everything. I pulled out the chair across from mine. You can sit. He did. No command. No assumption. Just a man waiting for permission. How have you been? I asked. Busy. That sounds suspiciously vague. Marco says I am learning boundaries. Marco deserves a raise. He has received 3. I laughed. Luca looked down, and for one quiet second the man who could silence rooms seemed almost uncertain. I wanted to call you. Why did you not? Because wanting something does not give me the right to take it. My breath slowed. Outside, snow began drifting beneath the streetlights. That sounds like progress. Painful progress. I smiled. Then, without thinking, I hummed my mother's lullaby. Luca's eyes lifted. This time no glass shattered. No doors locked. Nobody ran. He simply listened. When I reached the familiar ending, he said, You still do not know the last verse. Then teach me. He became very still. That could take a while. Maybe I have a while. His hand rested on the table between us. Open. Waiting. I looked at the tattoos across his knuckles, then at the man beneath them. I placed my hand beside his. He did not touch me until I turned my palm upward. Only then did his fingers close gently around mine. That was how Luca finally understood something his entire world had never taught him. Fear could make people obey. Power could make doors open. Money could build walls high enough to keep danger outside. But none of those things could make someone stay. He had protected me from his world. I had only reminded him that he still had a choice about the man he became inside it. He could command everyone around him. But he had to earn my trust. And when he finally stopped telling me to stay, I became free to choose him. Sometimes the strongest love is not the one that holds on the tightest. It is the one that opens its hand and waits. Thank you for staying with Emily and Luca until the final note. If their story moved you, please subscribe to the channel. Share this video with someone who believes people can still choose a better version of themselves, and join us for the next story. Until then, remember this. He ruled through fear, but love was the one thing he could never command.